In the deepest reaches of the Whispering Woods, where even the bravest warriors feared to tread after sunset there, existed a peculiar clearing known only as the Giggling Glade, and it was here that Marcus Ironheart, legendary adventurer and slayer of 17 dragons, finder of the lost chalice of mediocrity, and winner of the annual Turnip Festival 3 years running, found himself in what could only be described as the most ridiculous predicament of his entire career. He had come seeking the fabled crystal of infinite snacking, a magical artifact rumored to produce unlimited cheese wheels, but what he found instead were approximately 300 tiny, translucent, and incredibly annoying pixie ghosts who seemed to think that haunting consisted primarily of tickling people's noses and hiding their left boots. Marcus stood there in his full plate armor, his magnificent beard braided with exactly 17 warrior beads, one for each dragon naturally. Trying to maintain his dignity as a pixie ghost wearing a tiny top hat flew directly through his forehead while making raspberry sounds. The leader of these spectral nuisances, a pixie ghost named Sparklebottom, who wore what appeared to be a monocle made of solidified moonlight, floated before Marcus with her tiny arms crossed and an expression of severe disappointment on her thumb-sized face. "We have reviewed your application to cross our territory," she announced in a voice that sounded like wind chimes having an argument, "and the Pixie Council has determined that you are far too masculine to proceed. Your beard alone is emitting testosterone rays that are disrupting our ethereal frequency. We haven't seen this much concentrated manliness since that barbarian came through here trying to solve everything by flexing." Marcus blinked slowly, his brain struggling to process this information because, in all his years of adventuring, he had fought necromancers, bargained with demons, even spent 3 days trapped in a dungeon with nothing but an accordion for company, but never had his gender been cited as a reason he couldn't walk through a forest. "I'm sorry," Marcus said, his deep voice rumbling like an avalanche made of pure masculine confusion. "But are you seriously telling me that I couldn't pass through here because I am a man?" Sparklebottom nodded enthusiastically, her tiny pigtails bouncing with each bob of her head. "Absolutely. You see, the Giggling Glade operates on a very specific magical frequency that resonates with feminine energy. Male energy is just so clompy, so stompy, so unnecessarily intense. Last week we had a knight come through here, and he walked so aggressively that he accidentally intimidated our flowers into wilting. Plus, he kept trying to solve our riddles by threatening to stab him, which just doesn't work on a conceptual level." Marcus looked around at the clearing, noting that the flowers were indeed looking at him nervously, and one daisy had already fainted. Before Marcus could protest further, another pixie ghost, this one wearing what appeared to be a tiny leather jacket and sunglasses, zoomed up to Sparklebottom's side. "Boss, I've been reading his aura, and wow, this guy's masculine energy is off the charts. According to my spectral measurements, he's currently registering at approximately 947 man points. For reference, a normal dude is about 50 man points, and that barbarian was only 700. Sparklebottom gasped dramatically, clutching her tiny ghost pearls, and Marcus felt his eye twitch because he had not spent 10 years training in the mountains, learning to catch arrows with his teeth and wrestle bears for fun, only to be measured in man points by deceased pixies with attitude problems. "Look," Marcus said, trying to channel every diplomatic lesson he de-learned during that one time he accidentally became ambassador to the Squirrel Kingdom. "What if I just walk very quietly? I can tiptoe. I'm excellent at tiptoeing. I once tiptoed past a sleeping dragon for 6 hours straight." The pixie ghosts erupted in a chorus of tinkling laughter, the sound like someone shaking a bag of bells inside a wind tunnel, and Sparklebottom giggled while wiping away a glowing tear. "Oh, how adorable. He thinks tiptoeing will reduce his man points. That's like saying you can make the sun less bright by squinting at it." Marcus was about to give up and find another route when Sparklebottom suddenly stopped laughing and snapped her tiny fingers. "Wait, I have an idea." What if we just turned him into a girl? The entire clearing went silent, and even the wind stopped blowing, apparently shocked by this suggestion, and Marcus felt his beard bristle with alarm. "Excuse me, what now?" he asked, his voice going up an octave in concern. Sparklebottom was now floating excitedly in circles, her monocle gleaming with mischievous light. Yes, yes, it's perfect. We have a spare transformation spell left over from last year's Pixie Poltergeist party. We were going to use it to turn the moon into cheese, but this is so much better. We turn you into a woman, your man points drop to 0, you can cross our territory, and everyone's happy. The other pixie ghosts began cheering and throwing tiny confetti that seemed to be made of concentrated starlight while Marcus held up his hands in protest. Now, hold on just a minute. I am not interested in being magically gender swapped by a bunch of dead pixies just so I can walk through a forest. I'll go around. It's fine. I have time, but Sparklebottom was already gesturing to the other pixies, who began forming a circle around Marcus, their tiny hands glowing with pink and purple energy. Oh, don't be such a baby about it. It's completely reversible. Probably like 70% sure. Besides, the alternative is walking an extra 200 miles through the swamp of perpetual inconvenience. And trust me, you do not want to go there. Marcus tried to run, but his armored boots suddenly felt like they were made of lead as tiny pixie ghosts attached themselves to his feet, weighing him down with their surprisingly strong spectral grip. "This is illegal," he shouted, struggling against the magical restraints. "I have rights. I'm a registered member of the Adventurers Guild." Sparklebottom floated up to eye level with him, her monocle glinting dangerously. Section 47 of the Magical Forest Treaty clearly states that spirits and supernatural entities reserve the right to modify travelers who disrupt the natural magical balance. You're disrupting our balance, Mr. 947 man points. Now hold still, this won't hurt a bit, though it will feel absolutely bizarre. Before Marcus could protest further, the circle of pixie ghosts began, chanting in a language that sounded like someone trying to sing opera, while gargling sparkles and the air around Marcus started to shimmer and glow as he felt a tingling sensation that began at his toes and rapidly worked its way up his body. His armor, which had been custom forged to fit his massive warrior frame, suddenly felt loose and then began shrinking, reshaping itself to accommodate a very different body type, and his beard, his glorious 17-bead beard that he had been growing since he was 15 years old, suddenly retracted into his face like a scared turtle, leaving his chin distressingly smooth. "No, not the beard," Marcus cried out, his voice already beginning to shift into a higher register. But the transformation continued relentlessly as his broad shoulders narrowed. His muscular arms became more slender, though still clearly capable of wielding a sword. His chest developed in ways that made him deeply uncomfortable, and his waist cinched in despite the fact that he did 100 sit-ups every morning. When the glowing finally faded and the pixie ghosts stopped their chanting, Marcus looked down at himself and discovered that he was now very definitely a she, and her armor had transformed into what could only be described as the female adventurer version, which somehow involved the same amount of protection but with more stylish curves and an inexplicable amount of silver trim. "What?" Marcus said, her voice now unmistakably feminine and about 3 octaves higher than she was used to. "In the actual name of all that is holy have you done to me?" She reached up to where her beard used to be and felt only smooth skin, which made her want to cry, while Sparklebottom and the other pixie ghosts applauded wildly. "Magnificent, stupendous. Your man points have dropped all the way to -12, which means you're now registering as slightly more feminine than a bouquet of roses having feelings." Marcus stumbled forward and nearly fell over because her center of gravity had completely changed, catching herself against a tree which immediately sprouted flowers and began humming a cheerful tune. "This is insane," she muttered, trying to adjust to the sound of her own voice and realizing it naturally did this thing now where it went. up at the end of sentences, making everything sound slightly like a question, even when it wasn't. Sparkle Bottom patted Marcus on the shoulder with one tiny transparent hand. There, don't be so dramatic. You can walk through our territory now. Plus, think of it as an opportunity for personal growth. You'll gain a whole new perspective on life. Marcus stared at the pixie ghost with an expression that could have curdled milk, but noticed that the flowers in the clearing were no longer wilting and the magical energy felt more harmonious. She had to admit reluctantly, looking at her reflection in a tiny mirror made of crystallized dewdrops, that one of the pixies handed her that she still looked like someone who could kick down a dungeon door and fight a horde of goblins just now with better cheekbones and hair that sparkled. Fine, Marcus said, handing back the mirror and trying to walk forward with dignity, despite the fact that her hips now moved in a completely different way. I'll walk through your ridiculous glade, but the second I'm on the other side, the spell better wear off. Pixie ghosts all giggled and parted to create a clear path, and as Marcus began walking, trying to adjust her stride to account for her new body proportions, she noticed that the entire forest seemed to react differently to her presence, as birds landed on her shoulders, singing cheerful songs instead of fleeing, and terror and flowers bloomed in her footsteps. This is so weird, Marcus muttered, brushing a butterfly off her nose, while Sparkle Bottom floated alongside her, clearly pleased with herself. How long until this wears off? She asked, trying not to sound too concerned, and the pixie ghost made a show of checking a tiny ethereal pocket watch. Oh, probably about 3 hours after you leave our territory. Maybe 4. Possibly 6. There's a small chance it might be permanent, but that's only like 15%. Maybe 30%. Marcus stopped walking so abruptly that 3 pixie ghosts flew directly through her torso. 30%? She shouted, her new voice hitting registers that could probably shatter glass. You said it was reversible? Sparkle Bottom waved her tiny hand dismissively. Details. Look on the bright side. If it is permanent, you'll save so much time not having to groom that beard. Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to turn around and demand they reverse the spell immediately, but she was already halfway through the glade, and going back now seemed like it would just make everything worse, so she did what any legendary adventurer would do in such a situation and kept walking while muttering increasingly creative curses under her breath and making mental notes about which pixie ghosts she would haunt when she eventually died and became a ghost herself. As she finally reached the edge of the Giggling Glade, the pixie ghosts all gathered to wave goodbye, and Sparkle Bottom called out cheerfully, "Come back and visit us sometime. And remember, if you ever need to cross through our territory again, you now know the dress code." Marcus didn't look back, just raised one hand in what could charitably be interpreted as a wave, but was more accurately a gesture suggesting where the pixies could store their jokes, and she stepped out of the glade into the normal forest beyond, immediately checking herself to see if the transformation had begun reversing, but nothing happened. This is fine, she told herself, adjusting her transformed armor and trying to remember how to walk like a warrior instead of like someone who had just discovered they had hips. I faced worse. I once fought a dragon while suffering from food poisoning. I can handle being a woman for a few hours. She continued walking toward the crystal of infinite smacking, trying to focus on her quest, and not on the fact that her body now moved like a completely different instrument, and somewhere behind her in the Giggling Glade, the pixie ghosts high-fived each other with their tiny translucent hands, already planning their next pixie poltergeist party and discussing which unfortunate male adventurer they would transform next.